Hello and welcome to another session, in fact the last class of semester 1 from Ways with Words. This time I shall handle a short story by Graham Greene, A Shocking Accident. Okay. Graham Greene was born in England as the fourth child to his parents, Charles Henry Greene and Marion Raymond Greene. He first published his work Babbling April in 1925, which was a collection which was a volume of poetry. He categorized his fiction as novels and entertainments. His first novel, The Man Within, was written in 1929. Some of his other novels are Stamboul Train, Journey Without Maps, Brighton Rock, The Power and Glory, The Heart of the Matter, The End of the Affair, and so on. His entertainments were usually suspense thrillers and detective stories. They include works like Ministry of Fear and The Third Man. After he converted to Catholicism in 1926, his religious convictions also influenced his writings. This can be reflected in works like The Quiet American, Brighton Rock, The Heart of the Matter, and Burnt Out Case. A Burnt Out Case. His plays include The Living Room and Potting Shed. A Sort of Life. Dangerous Edge, A Life of Graham Greene, is a documentary about the life of the author. Several of his works of fiction were adapted as films. The Graham Greene Birthplace Trust organizes the Graham Greene International Festival every year. Black humor. Now, there is always a tinge of black humor in Graham Greene's short stories. Black humor is a form of humor that disregards human sufferings like pain or death. The laughter arises from skepticism. Death of parents can be very painful to young children. The manner of death in the following story, that is a shocking accident, has been treated as something that occurs in an undignified fashion. This makes it comic yet painful to Jerome, the protagonist. The story captures the agony of the protagonist when others consider the manner of the death of his father as rather comic. The story was written a decade after the World War. Europe and the rest of the world had by then witnessed a lot of death and attendant sufferings. The social atmosphere then had engendered views about life being absurd and that it was nearly impossible to seek either value or meaning in life. Now you have to note that Jerome imagines a heroic death for his father at the beginning of the story. Now, and also you have to contrast it with the subsequent revelation of his father's death. So I want you to bear that in mind. Just understand what Jerome always wanted, always imagined a heroic death, and then you have to contrast it with what happens when he comes to know of how his father dies. This story was originally published in the magazine Punch in 1597. It then reappeared in Greene's 1967 collection. May We Borrow Your Husband and Other Comedies of Sexual Life. This story was adapted into a short comedy film by James Scott in 1982. Now let's begin A Shocking Accident. You will find Jerome as the protagonist of the short story, and it's all about black humor. As we discussed earlier, Jerome expects his father he imagines a heroic death for his father at the beginning of the story. We find that at the beginning he imagines a heroic death of his father. Like you have it in the beginning of the short story. Your father has had an accident. Oh, Mr. Wordsworth looked at him with some surprise. A serious accident. Yes, sir. Jerome worshipped his father. The verb is exact. He had great reverence and he loved his father. He worshipped his father. As man recreates God, so Jerome recreated his father. From a restless, widowed author into a mysterious adventurer who traveled in far places. So from this itself you can understand how Jerome imagined his father to be. He, as the paragraph goes, now it occurred to him that his father might have been wounded in a hail of machine gun bullets. So from this we understand that the child or Jerome anticipated, or he imagines a heroic death for his father at the beginning of the story. And later, when Wordsworth tells him of the manner of his father's death, there is this, a kind of, it is indeed a shocking incident to him. I'm afraid your father was seriously hurt. Oh, in fact, Jerome, he died yesterday, quite without pain. Did they shoot him through the heart? So that's what Jerome asks. Jerome thinks that his father is shot. He has died a warrior-like death. And Wordsworth, Mr. Wordsworth, his housemaster, he says, in fact, Jerome, I beg your pardon, what did you say, Jerome? Did they shoot him through the heart? Then Wordsworth gives out the secret, or not the secret, but gives out the detail of his death. Nobody shot him, Jerome. A pig fell on his head, on him. An inexplicable convulsion took place in the nerves of Mr. Wordsworth's face. He really looked for a moment as though he were going to laugh. He closed his eyes, composed his features, and said rapidly, as though it were necessary to expel the story as rapidly as possible, your father was walking along a street in Naples when a pig fell on him. A shocking accident. So see, the whole story revolves around this. You have one protagonist on one side who considers his father godlike. He worships his father. He feels that his father is a genius. Okay, and this child imagines a heroic death for his father. And what happened? His father, how did he die? His father died when a pig from balcony, when he was walking along the Naples street. Pigs are normally kept on the balcony, right? From there on the building, from there, a big fat pig fell on his head and he died. Okay, so the manner of his death, the manner of his father's death is rather comic. But again, death is death. It is pain. It inflicts pain on the one, like for Jerome, it is his father who died, right? So, but when a stranger hears of this, it is comedy to him, right? You find black humor, the play of black humor here. Black humor, as I told you, is a form of humor that disregards human feelings or human sufferings like pain or death. And the laughter arises from skepticism. I also want to tell you that in the beginning of the story, Jerome, the main character, attends a preparatory or prep school. Now, this is an independent school for children at the lower level, and also can be considered as a boarding school. Okay, and in these schools, students are often divided into groups. പല ഗ്രൂപ്പുകളായിട്ടാണ് അവരെ തിരിച്ചിരിക്കുന്നത്. Each group has its own teams and activities, and these groups are called houses. That is why you have a house master. Wordsworth is a house master. So it's like a boarding school, okay, and in this school, students are divided into group, this house, that house. Like in Harry Potter you have seen Griffin's house, then what is it, Slytherin house, Hufflepuff, and all that. So just like that, they are also divided into houses, and each one has its own master and a teacher, and the house master of Jerome is Mr. Wordsworth. Okay, and in the second part of the story, when you read the second part of the story, you will find that the protagonist Jerome has grown up, he's older, and he attends a public school, which is UK's tradition, which is in the UK, and it is a boys only school, and these were all perhaps established in the 18th and 19th century. So they are all very traditional, very famous schools. Now in this story, I want you to read the story. I'm not going to read the story for you because this is an online platform and it would be very boring to read the whole story. So I'll just tell you the story, the important themes and things like that in the video. So we have the theme of frustration here, we have the theme of perception, we have the theme of social opinion, fear, acceptance, and love, and coming of age, maturity, reaching maturity. Now this is taken from complete short story collection of Graham Greene, and the story is narrated in the third person by an unnamed narrator. And after reading the story, the reader, we all realize that Greene may be exploring the theme of frustration. Jerome is fully aware that others have and also will laugh at how his father died. How did his father die? A pig fell on his head. നമ്മുടെ നാട്ടിലും കുറേ നമ്മൾ കേട്ടിട്ടുണ്ട് ഇല്ലേ, ഞാനൊക്കെ കേട്ടിട്ടുണ്ട് 2-3 പേരെ പറ്റിയിട്ട്. മരണത്തിൻ്റെ കാരണം ഒന്നുകിൽ ചക്ക വന്ന് വീണിട്ട് കഴുത്തൊടിഞ്ഞ് മരിച്ച ഒരു സംഭവമുണ്ട്. പക്ഷെ അത് കേൾക്കുമ്പോൾ പെട്ടെന്ന് നമ്മൾ അറിയാതെ ചിരിച്ചു പോകും. നമ്മൾ ചിരിക്കുന്നു, ഇറ്റ് ഇവോക്സ് ലാഫ്റ്റർ, ബട്ട് ദാറ്റ്സ് എ ബ്ലാക്ക് ഹ്യൂമർ അല്ലേ. പെയിനും ഡെത്തും നമ്മൾ അറിയാതെ ഉള്ളിൽ ചിരിച്ചു പോകുന്നതാണ് ബിക്കോസ് ഓഫ് ദ വേ ഇൻ വിച്ച് ദ പേഴ്സൺ ഡൈഡ്. ചക്ക വന്ന് കഴുത്തിൽ വീണ് കഴുത്തൊടിഞ്ഞ് മരിച്ച കുറേ സംഭവങ്ങളുണ്ട്. തേങ്ങ തലയിൽ വീണ് മരിക്കുന്നു അല്ലേ, അങ്ങനെയൊക്കെ എത്രയോ. പക്ഷെ അതൊരു കൊച്ചു കുഞ്ഞിൻ്റെ മേളിലാണ് വീണെങ്കിൽ നമുക്കത് അങ്ങനെ ഒരു ചിരി വരില്ല അല്ലേ. ഒരു കൊച്ചു കുഞ്ഞിൻ്റെ തലയിലാണ് തേങ്ങ വീണ് അങ്ങനെ ഒരു മരണം സംഭവിക്കാൻ ചിരി വരില്ല. പക്ഷെ ഒരു പ്രായമായ ഒരാൾ, അയാളുടെ തലയിൽ തേങ്ങ വീണു എന്നൊക്കെ പറയുമ്പോൾ, അല്ലെങ്കിൽ ഒരു പ്രായമായ സ്ത്രീയോ അല്ലെങ്കിൽ പ്രായമായ ആളോ തേങ്ങ വീണു അങ്ങനെ മരിച്ചു എന്ന് പറയുമ്പോൾ ശരിക്കും ഭയങ്കരമായിട്ട് ചിരി വരുമെന്നല്ല, പക്ഷെ എന്തോ ഉള്ളിൽ നമ്മൾ ഒരു കോമഡി, എവിടെയോ ഒരു ഹ്യൂമർ arises. That's called black humor because after all it is suffering, after all it is death, and we are becoming insensitive to it, right? So that and also just imagine the condition of those children in that house. അവരുടെ അച്ഛൻ മരിച്ചത് എങ്ങനെ എന്ന് പറയുമ്പോൾ, അല്ലെങ്കിൽ അവരുടെ മുത്തശ്ശനോ അച്ഛനോ മരിച്ചത് എങ്ങനെയെന്ന് ആരെങ്കിലും ചോദിക്കുകയാണെങ്കിൽ ഇത് പറയുമ്പോൾ they certainly know that they will laugh. So there is a kind of frustration. അതും ആ പേരൻറ്റുമായിട്ട് അത്രയും അടുപ്പമുള്ളൊരു കുട്ടിയാണെങ്കിൽ ഒന്നും അത് പറയും വേണ്ട, എത്രത്തോളം വിഷമം അല്ലെങ്കിൽ എത്രത്തോളം സങ്കടമാണ് ആ കുട്ടിയുടെ മനസ്സിൽ വരുന്നതെന്ന് നമുക്ക് ഊഹിച്ചെടുക്കാവുന്നതേ ഉള്ളൂ. Jerome worshipped his father, he loved his father, okay, and he is fully aware that others have and will laugh at how his father died. There is a sense that Jerome is frustrated. That's why I said there is a theme of frustration. And as such, he decides upon slightly changing the story of his father's death. As we read on, we understand that. This may be important, as Jerome may not only be frustrated at how others have reacted when told about his father's death, but also afraid to tell the real story of how his father died due to the fear of feeling embarrassed. It is as though Jerome feels overly concerned with social opinion when it comes to the subject of his father's death. This may be important, as Jerome's hesitancy when it comes to the truth about his father's death suggests that Jerome himself is not comfortable or accepting of how his father died. Jerome, when he first heard of his father's death, had romantic notions about how his father might have died. He was shot. Was he shot in the heart? Did they shoot him? That's what he asks. He imagines a heroic death. And Jerome's perception of his father is very interesting, as it is clear to the reader that Jerome idolized his father. He worshipped his father. Though his father was a travel writer, for Jerome, his father was something more important. He worked for the government as a spy. Now, this is all imagination of Jerome. As to why Jerome could need to escape into a world whereby he distorted the image of his father is difficult to say. Why he did so? It may be a case that Jerome strongly felt the loss of his mother at a very young age and felt the need to create an alternative persona for his father as a way of handling and accepting the circumstances he found himself in. Jerome's mother died at a very young age, so maybe that is the reason why he imagined a lot of things. He imagined his father being working for a government spy. He imagined his father as a hero. He idolized his father. So maybe that was a way of him, handling and accepting the circumstances he was in. All right, he was adjusting with his circumstances. So it's to do with psychology. Death can be very traumatic at a very young age. It is traumatic at any age, no doubt. But for Jerome, to lose his mother so young could have been devastating, could have been terrifying. And as a result, Jerome may have created an alternative world around him when it came to his father in order to help him free himself from the pain that he felt over his mother's death, and which he was too young to handle. So he creates an imaginary kind of world, all right, where he considers his father very important, very dignified, and very hero-like. Okay, that was all to do with his his way of escaping from that trauma or the pain that he was facing when he lost his mother. He lost his mother at a very small age. So and his father was a travel writer. He would be away for several months, and maybe that to cope up with that feeling, he was in the boarding school. So to cope up with his loneliness, he created a kind of an imaginary world where he would imagine his father as a spy working for the government, and he would be a hero. That's why he believes, or he thought, that his father would have been killed in an encounter with the enemies. So that's why he asked, did they shoot him through his chest? And Wordsworth is like perplexed. What do you say? Shoot him? No, he died. A pig fell on his head. That's what Wordsworth tells him. And that was indeed a very shocking thing to him. In reality, Jerome has lost both his parents before he had reached the age of 10. This alone would be enough for a young boy to be sensitive to others' opinions. It also doesn't help that Jerome is trying to accept the manner in which his father died. So he tries his level best to accept that situation, but he can't. Jerome cannot accept the way or the manner in which he died, because he has always put his father in that high pedestal. Okay, the fact that Jerome is so worried about Sally. Who's Sally? As you read on, you will understand that Sally is Jerome's wife. Okay, soon she becomes his wife. Sally's reaction to how his father died is also interesting, as Jerome fears that even Sally will laugh at the absurdity of how his father died. However, contrary to what he expected, Sally was a sensitive girl, similar to Jerome. You would say, made for each other couples. So likewise, Sally was very sensitive. Her eyes were filled with tears when she heard how his father died. And this was not something that he had been used to. People earlier, unlike Sally, others around him would call him by names. They would call him Jerome Pig. They even nicknamed him Jerome Pig. They would make fun of him. They would abuse him, verbally abuse him. And he had been listening to all this for a long time, a long while, that he was scared that even Sally would have. Sally is a person whom he loves, his wife, would-be wife, and he fears that even she would laugh at the way when she hears how his father died. It is as though Sally is not judging Jerome by the fact that his father died an unusual death. To her, it is horrible how Jerome's father had died. In many ways, Sally's reaction strengthens Jerome's connection with Sally. And this can be seen as, you can see that Jerome is coming of age, or Jerome is attaining maturity. With this, he realizes that he is no longer burdened by the social opinions of others. He is no longer embarrassed by how his father died. Sally teaches him a lesson, and from this, it's not just teaching him a lesson. Deep inside, he understands that he doesn't have to feel so bad about it. He doesn't have to feel, he needn't care about the society, what the society feels. He needn't be afraid or embarrassed about how his father died. So that shows his maturity level. That shows his coming of age level. Okay. It is as though Sally is that pathway to a new chapter in Jerome's life. Not only does he intend to marry her, but when he leaves his aunt's home with Sally, Jerome sees babies in Sally's eyes. So that it's a beautiful romantic way of putting it. That means he has accepted her as his wife and the future mother of the mother of his future children. It is through Sally's reaction to his father's death that Jerome is finally able to accept how his father died. There is also probably a realization within Jerome that not everybody is going to laugh at the story of his father's death. Earlier he felt that the whole society, everybody is the same, all human beings are the same, they will all laugh. But now he understands, or there's a realization that it's not, everyone is not insensitive as he thought they would be. Okay, there are people like Sally, there are people as sensitive as Sally. That not everybody will be so cold. So cold in the sense, what do you mean by cold? Cold in the sense very insensitive, harsh to the feelings of others. Sally has managed to remove all that fear factor that Jerome has been going through these many years. It has become an issue of no importance and no longer a burden to Jerome. Through Sally's love, Jerome has managed to move on from the opinions of others and the fears that may have crippled him when it came to the issue of his father's death. He has grown as a person through Sally's understanding of how his father died, which leaves the reader suspecting that Jerome will be happy for the first time since his father's death. So let's hope for a happy life for Jerome. He had suffered a lot. His father's death, which was a very shocking accident, because he had already imagined his father to be, or he had already idolized his father as a hero. And now when he hears the way how his father died, the poor child is terrified. He is burdened by the fact of how people would take him, or how people would react to his father's death. He had been bullied and abused in his school. People often called him nicknames, he called him Jerome Pig, and so on. And he felt that everyone in the world are the same. They would all laugh at him, and he tried his level best to hide how his father died. He made stories, different versions of stories, to narrate how his father died. But eventually everybody would laugh, and when they hear of how the father dies. But Sally changed everything. Sally shows how that everybody are not as cold as Jerome thought. Sally is a very sensitive person. She had tears in her eyes. She loved Jerome, and also she felt pity. She felt sad on the way his father died, and she felt it very horrifying. So then from that day onwards, his love for Sally was immense, and it was perhaps like a gift of God. And the readers anticipate, or the readers, we feel that the happier times are for Jerome has come, and he would live happily with his wife. And there ends the lesson. So thank you, and that's it. So thank you, and keep safe.